pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for this Sunday, for the celebration of those graduating from high school, for the celebration of our Anglican community. I pray now, Lord, as we enter into a time of exploring your gospel, may the words of my lips and the meditation of all of our hearts be honoring and pleasing to you. Amen. Now that my kids are getting older, one of my favorite things to do with them is to watch all of the old movies and cartoons that I used to like to watch as a kid. And it's great because my kids are, still young enough that they don't know that those, crappy graphics and super effects are really just pitiful. And you can see the lines and wires and stuff, but they love them. Jude and Rachel, and even sometimes, Jude and Lydia, and sometimes even Rachel, really get into my old superhero movies. But by far, Jude is the most obsessed. And you have to understand, Jude is the quintessential superhero little boy. We don't even call him Jude anymore. He's just Dash from the movie The Incredibles. What's really neat is that, Jude, if you've ever seen The Incredibles, Jude actually looks like Dash. He's got blonde hair, and there's one day I slicked it back, and he just was awesome. He makes a little running sound effect. Jude is obsessed with my superhero movies. Well, not too long ago, Jude was watching the proper Superman. The one with Christopher Reeves? That's the only Superman we should ever watch. Well, after the movie, he came up to me, and he told me something that was pretty profound. He said, "Dad, you know something? Superman is kind of like Jesus. In fact, I think Superman is Jesus." So I did what any normal father would do. I sat Jude down on her table, and I pulled out all of my books on systematic theology, and I began to explain to him how this comment was heretical, and that he needed to repent in sackcloth and ashes for this unorthodox liberal comment. Well, Jude's a strong-willed child, so after a vigorous 5-hour debate, I finally broke his will, and he conceded that Superman is not like Jesus, nor are they the same person. Okay, that's not actually what I did. But I did ask him what he meant by this. And he told me that, Jesus and Superman both have these supernatural powers. And they both help people, and neither of them can die. So they have to be the same person. To Jude, because Jesus and Superman share these similarities, they are the same person. But here's the thing. I think a lot of people actually hear the gospel stories and listen to Jesus' miracles like the one we just heard in Luke chapter 7 and think the same thing. That Jesus is kind of like some of our fictional superheroes, or Jesus is kind of like a mythological person like Zeus or Hercules, or Jesus is kind of like one of the Avengers, always swooping down to save the day. And we can think that Jesus is nothing more than kind of one of these fictional characters, these mythological characters, who has all these really neat stories. The miracles, they're really cool stories. But they're no more than kind of watching the old Superman movies with Christopher Reeves. They're entertaining, but they really don't have much to say to our own lives, because that's something in the past. I mean, if it's true, Jesus doesn't swoop down and save the day anymore. And we can think of Jesus as one of these mythological or fictional characters. And we can think they're really cool. But is that all the writers had in mind when they recorded these miraculous stories? Is that what the writers are wanting us to get out of these miracles? To Jude, and I think to a lot of Christians, Jesus' miracles are just cool, and they kind of remind us of our own superhero stories. But the problem with that is that they can become so distant and unrelative to our own lives. They can simply be stories that entertain us. And so Jesus can be nothing more than some sort of fictional character like Merlin, or like Zeus, or like Superman. And it's hard for us when we take that point of view, when we focus so much on the miracle and the powers of Jesus, we can become disconnected as to what the gospel writers were intending, which was to show us how God was actually trying to reconnect with us in our lives, to show us how God was trying to restore our relationship, to show us how actually these stories are very much relative to our lives today. You see, unlike our fictional superheroes, Jesus' miraculous accounts are meant to connect with our lives. They're not fantasy, they're reality. They were meant to reveal something about Jesus, and they're also meant to reveal something about ourselves. The gospel writers tell us these stories not because they want to entertain us or wow us, but because they want us to connect with Jesus and with his mission in the world. And Jesus didn't perform these miracles to impress the crowds around him or to prove that he's some sort of superhero. Jesus' miracles are meant to prove he is who he claimed to be. They're also meant to show and be a pointer of where he's going and to point where he ultimately wants to take the whole world. They also reveal a pattern of salvation. And those are the three things I want us to think about as we look through Luke chapter 7. That these miracles are proof of who Jesus is. That they are pointers of where he is taking the world. And they establish a pattern of salvation for us. So in Luke 7, we see that after preaching the Sermon on the Mount, that Jesus went back to his headquarters in Galilee, into the city of Capernaum. And when he entered into the city, he learned that the servant of a Roman centurion was about to die. Now, although the soldier had worked for the Roman government and now had 100 Roman soldiers under his authority, we're told by Luke that he treated the Jews well. And why this is remarkable is because most Roman soldiers, in fact, despised the local people, especially Jewish people. No one ever understood the Jews. They were so odd and strange. But not this guy. Luke tells us that actually he treated the Jews well, and he came to respect and admire them. In fact, at one point he said, the people of the town said, you have to do this for this guy. He even built our local synagogue. Luke presents him to us as a humble Gentile, looking in at Israel and Israel's God and coming to admire and respect this and opening himself up to Israel's God. So then we learn in verse 2 that this centurion had a servant whom he valued or whom he loved, and he was sick and about to die. And the centurion didn't want that to happen. And then Luke tells us in verse 3 that this centurion heard of Jesus. And what I think that Luke means by he had heard of Jesus is that he had heard that Jesus was a miracle worker. That Jesus did have these kind of supernatural gifts and powers. But I also think it means a little more than that. If he had been studying ancient Jewish culture and religion, he also knew that there was this long-awaited Messiah. And he probably heard that Jesus may in fact be this Messiah. And he would have known that the Messiah meant he wasn't just king of the Jews, but he was king of the world. It's an important point. We'll get back to that. But just keep that in mind. And I think that's the whole reason why we get this miracle in our gospel. Because it proves that what this man heard about Jesus is in fact true. That he is in fact a miracle worker. More importantly, he is in fact the Messiah. That's why I think all the miracles are recorded. To prove who Jesus is. The first thing that all the miracles prove is they prove his identity. When we read Jesus' miracles over and over again in the New Testament, we see how these miracles fulfill some sort of Old Testament prophecy. Or there's something that only God can do. So it proves that Jesus is in fact God. It proves that Jesus is the Old Testament Messiah. And many times after Jesus performs these miracles, the gospel writers will add, then the crowd believed. Or then the disciples believed even more. And so Jesus does this miracle. He heals the servant because he wants the centurion to know what he has heard about him is in fact true. His identity is true. Second, it proves his authority as the Messiah. You see, when Jesus calms the storm in Mark chapter 4, it proved his authority over nature. Or when Jesus commanded Lazarus to be raised from the dead in John 11, it proved that Jesus had authority over death and life. Or when Jesus commanded demons to be cast out in Matthew 8, it proved that Jesus had authority over evil and Satan and sin in the world. Here, in Luke chapter 7, Jesus expands that authority even further. Luke records that he was able to perform this miracle without even going into a centurion's home. Now it seems like a frivolous detail, but it's actually really important. Because the centurion asked them, he goes up, before Jesus can get to the home, the centurion sent friends ahead and said, "Don't even let this man come to my home, for I am an unworthy man." Now what he means by that is that at the minimum, he recognizes that Jesus is holy and righteous, and therefore, he is unworthy to have this holy and righteous man. at the maximum, he's recognizing that Jesus is in fact potentially the king of the world. And so he's unworthy to have the king come and enter into his house. And then he kind of gives this weird little saying. He says, just say the word and it will happen. Because I'm a centurion, and I understand how these things work. I have 100 men underneath me, and they do as I do, and they go as I go, and they come as I say come. And if you say, to my servant, well, I know what's going to happen. It almost sounds like he doesn't want Jesus to come in and see the mess in his place. Don't come over. I want your powers and your authority, but just, no, the house is a mess. Don't come over. But actually, it's a really important point. Here's what I'm getting at. This centurion had command over 100 Roman soldiers. There's no way that you could manage 100 people. You couldn't physically be present with 100 men and give them orders every day. He simply needed to be able to say the command and his soldiers follow order. That's what it's like to have authority over 100 Roman soldiers. And so what he's saying to Jesus is, if you're really king of the world, if you're king of the universe, you don't have to be present everywhere. You simply need to give the command and it happens. I know that if you're king, you don't have to come to my house and heal my servant. You just simply have to give the command, and it will happen. And that's exactly what happened. It proves his authority is greater than simply his mere presence. It proves that his authority goes across the world, across the universe. This miracle proves Jesus' identity. It proves his authority. It proves that what this centurion heard about Jesus is in fact true. But this miracle is not just proof of who he is, nor are the miracles mere demonstrations of his identity. They're much more. They're also pointers of where he is going, what he is ultimately doing in the world, and where he ultimately wants to take the world. And this is where Jesus is unlike any superhero we've ever thought of or imagined. Think about all those superheroes again. Merlin, Zeus, and Superman. Well, when Merlin performs a trick, it proves that he's a wizard, but that's it. It proves Merlin's a wizard. When Jesus does a miracle, like raising Lazarus from the dead, it not only proves who he is, but it also is a way of Jesus saying to us and pointing out that he is restoring life to this world, that he is conquering death in this world. Or like when Zeus, he controls thunder and lightning and storms, and it proves that he is strong. But when Jesus controls the storms, like on the boat, it not only proves that he has authority over the storms, but it's a way of Jesus pointing out and showing us that he is undoing all the unnatural side effects of sin in the world, like storms and chaos and evil. Or like when Superman battles the bad guy, it proves that he's the good guy. He's for justice. But when Jesus battles demons and casts out demons, it not only proves that he is a good, holy man, but it's also a way of showing and pointing out that he is casting out Satan and evil in this world. Jesus' miracles aren't just proof of who he is, they also are pointing out what he is doing in the world. They're pointing out his mission. You see, almost all of Jesus' miracles have to do with redeeming our human suffering. They have to do with redeeming illness, with death, injustice, natural disaster, and so on. Some of you might be thinking, what about that story about the wedding feast and the wine? Trust me, if you ever run out of wine, you are suffering. His miracles deal with our human suffering and where we struggle, and they point out that Jesus is putting the world back to right. Jesus' mission is putting the world back to the way God intended it to be. They're pointing to the fact that he is restoring what was undone in the garden. Now when you think about that Jesus is pointing to the fact that he's restoring the natural order of God, then you have to realize that Jesus' miracles aren't really supernatural at all. In fact, they're the most natural thing that could possibly be. They're the natural order in which God wanted his creation to exist. Death is not natural. Suffering is not natural. Hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, those are not natural things. Those are unnatural things. They are unnatural side effects of sin and evil in this world. Jesus, when he comes and he heals Lazarus, or when he calms the storm, he's saying, I'm not merely putting things back to their natural order. I'm not supernatural. This is the natural way God wanted things. So in our story in Luke 7, when the men return to the centurion's home and they find the servant well, Jesus is pointing to the fact that he is putting the world back to order, back into a world where death and sickness no longer exists. And this relates to the final thing I want us to look at. That Jesus' miracles reveal to us a pattern of salvation. You see, the heart of this story is not really the miracle of a servant becoming well and being saved from death. And now, that's important because that's, without it, we wouldn't have a story. But what the real heart of the story, what the gospel writer Luke is trying to highlight for us, is that this reveals to us the pattern of salvation. The centurion's faith saved his servant's life. Now, when you think about it, it's pretty amazing that this centurion ever even had faith in Jesus, even if he was studying Judaism. Because this was a strong man. This was no wimp. This was not some gullible guy. This was a sharp fella. I mean, he would have been an officer in our own military. He had risen to the ranks through hard work, skill, and valor. More than once, he had risked his life and put himself in danger, battled strong battles and difficult situations on the battlefield. His character and leadership were tested, and he was rewarded for this. He was the commander of over 100 Roman soldiers in one of the toughest, most fierce armies in the world. But here's what happens. This guy has a sick servant whom he loves, and he realizes he can do nothing. He can't do anything. The man who once was able to go into any country and conquer the people can't even save his own friend. And who does he turn to? Does he turn to his pagan gods? Does he turn to his own doctors? No, he turns to this man whom he has heard of. That's remarkable. In fact, Luke tells us that Jesus himself is amazed at this guy's faith. There's very few times that Jesus is amazed. So it's worthy to be highlighted. This man understood the power of Jesus. This man understood that Jesus could heal from a distance if he is who he says he is. And Jesus wanted to make sure that the crowd didn't miss the point. So he turned to them and he said, I tell you, I have not found such faith even in Israel. Even amongst my own people, I have never found such faith. And so from a distance, Jesus heals the centurion's servant. I don't think Luke or Jesus wants us to miss the point of this story. Although Jesus may not physically be present with us in our own lives, he can still do powerful works in our own lives. He can still give us salvation when we place our faith in him. Maybe you're here this morning and you have physical or emotional healing, or you're in need of physical or emotional healing. Maybe you need a spiritual renewal. Maybe you need healing in your marriage or in your relationship with your children. Maybe you're crying out for a job or some way to make the ends meet at the end of the month. Maybe you just need something and it doesn't feel like Jesus can do anything because, well, like Superman and all those other fictional characters, he's long in the past. But what Luke's showing us in chapter 7, although Jesus is not physically present with us, his power is not diminished. He is still able to work in our lives because his authority is over the whole world. He simply needs to give the command and it happens. He still speaks with authority. And what Luke and Jesus are telling us is that we need to place our faith in him and him alone, and place our requests before him, and to believe in his ability to meet our needs and our situations. Let's amaze Jesus with our own faith, like the centurion amazed Jesus with his. Can you place your faith in Jesus like the centurion? Because when we do, it not only can heal our lives, but it can save us from eternal death. Jesus' stories are more than exciting and entertaining stories about a superhero that existed over millennia ago. They are stories that prove who Jesus is. They point to where he's going, and they reveal our pattern of salvation. This morning, do you have that same faith in Jesus as the centurion? Do you believe those things about Jesus? Does this miracle show you who he is? Does it reveal to you where he's going? Does it show you how to have faith in him so that you can experience that same salvation? Can you trust in Jesus? If you can't say that, then I pray that when we come forward in a few minutes to receive what we could say is the real presence of Jesus, that you feel his presence in your life, that you can say with the centurion, I believe, I place my faith in him and in him alone.